Kia ora. My name is Gayle and I was diagnosed in 2011 in a hospital in London when I was living and working in United Arab Emirates. I was just going on a quick fly-through visit on that my daughter arranged everything for Easter, so it was like 3 days in London, and then I went to Ireland to meet her. She was studying in Gayle University, and then we were meant to go back to London and to Paris, and then come back to London and then go back to Ireland. Unfortunately, while I was in London for those 3 days, by the time I got off the plane, I was sick, and like really strangely sick, and doing strange things. And I text her and I'm like, Jamie, I'm not very well. And she's like, oh Mum, go buy some Panadol, get on a bus or get on a boat, you're in London. So I did for 3 days until I just felt so bad and so many horrible things were happening. I asked them at where I was staying for the closest hospital and just went down to A&E, and they tried to figure out what was wrong with me, and they put me in a ward for tropical diseases because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with my headache, and they thought I had something like meningitis. So then they sent me to this ward and sent a doctor of tropical diseases, and he said there was nothing wrong with my brain because they gave me a CT scan because of the knives in my head, but I had no white blood cells, like they'd all gone walkabout, he said. So he knew just from that, because I guess they see so many people with HIV in England, that that was a typical response to someone who was seroconverting. And then he asked if he could do the test. He told me I had swollen lymph nodes, asked me the hard questions like, do you do drugs, do you use needles, have you had unprotected sex, can we do an HIV test? So of course I said yes, I would never bury my head in the sand. And he said he would ring me in 3 days, but because he was fairly sure what was wrong with me, he said he just gave me loads of drugs and said, you know, you might as well carry on your holiday. So I did. I had to change all my plans. And then in Ireland I got a phone call. He said, if it's positive, I'd like you to come back and see me, but if it's negative, you won't have to. So I got the phone call when I was in Ireland with my daughter, and he said, I'd like you to come back to the hospital and for a clinic appointment. And so then of course I knew that I had HIV. And then he said, you will need a second test, but don't expect different results. And that's, I was very lucky because finding out so quickly, you know, I was able to deal with I was just lucky, I guess. Okay, so I had to then go back to UAE where I was working. I couldn't get a second test there because if you're diagnosed with HIV in most of those countries, but UAE I knew for definite, I would be arrested and then deported. So when I say arrested, like put in jail, with a proper jail with, you know, like shackles and stuff. So I couldn't say anything, and then I was going home for my their summer break in June, so I had to wait till June to come back to New Zealand. So then I changed my plans and flew straight to Auckland. I had rung up Body Positive when I finally fell to pieces. Somebody gave me a Body Positive number, one of the New Zealand teachers, and so I went straight to Body Positive officers, and Bruce Kilmster was the one. He did the little finger prick test, and then he took me to Auckland Hospital. And then I went back to UAE and finished my contract for the next year. But it was scary and I had to be careful, but I ended up telling quite a few people, actually, friends and that. And I was surrounded by love and compassion. I had teachers from lots of different countries, but especially my South African teachers, because everybody knows somebody with it, and English and Irish, and the people that I told were just amazing. I couldn't get any drugs, I couldn't get any medical help, but I just had so much love and support. I was never left out. I was always like, they would make sure that they looked after me. It's amazing. And then I came back to New Zealand, I got all the drugs, but not so much of the support. New Zealand's, because it's not very prevalent, people don't understand it. So there's still a lot of learning to be done here. Yeah. Just, so people don't understand that it's okay and we're not dangerous, we're not to be treated like a leper. Yeah. I came back in 2012 and I went, and my doctor saw me immediately, my ID specialist, Jill, and I've had excellent medical support. The first time I ended up in A&E, I was put in quarantine by a young nurse who didn't know. But that's okay. It's all a learning curve, and I didn't know either. So anyway, the medical support has been really good. People like friends and family. My family has been wonderful. My ex-husband and my children have been great. Everyone else, it took a bit longer, but that's because also I was away for 6 years, so you have to rebuild relationships. So I spent the 5 years in Invercargill working and just moved to the West Coast, and over those 5 years, the friends that they get to know you, they learn about you. They don't see, you tell them about your HIV, but then they don't see the HIV, they don't see the sick person, they see the person. And so they just don't really, I've had okay support. I had a lot of support from Positive Women and from Body Positive, and they have been brilliant. And if it wasn't for those organisations when I first came home, it was really difficult, and it was really sad. And they helped me so much. And then for my birthday, when I was starting to feel a bit more like back to my old self, the Pride Parade was actually on my birthday. I'm a costume maker. I'm like, yay, they're having a parade for me, it's my birthday. So for my 51 birthday, I flew up to Auckland and joined, and Positive Women that was their first Pride Parade. And ever since then, every year we go on the Pride Parade, and it's so much fun. So, doing things like that is like your support grows and you get to meet other people. I became a positive speaker because people just need to be educated and to know that it's okay, and to know that we don't want it. We want to stop transmission. I would not wish my HIV and my experience of HIV on any single person. And the only way to do that is to educate. But also I want to educate people that if you have HIV positive people are the same as every other person. We cannot give you our disease, and we do not go around giving people our disease. I'm disturbed by the fact that every time they interview, like World AIDS Days, they will always ask that question, how many people have you met that's gone around deliberately infecting people? Why? So who would do that? So who would do lots of crimes? Only a very few people that have other problems, not the bulk of people. 39 million people with HIV do not want to go around giving everyone else your HIV. Maybe 1%, maybe 0.5%. So things like that, they need to be talked about. And then also I'm undetectable like Charlie Sheen. So that needs to be learnt about. This is 2018 and it is not 1985, and people need to understand that it's a different world. HIV is not, we are not lepers. The people in those early days, and it was GRID and they didn't know what it was, and to me they're the veterans, are the heroes. They're like, they're the ones that fought because they were so sick and dying, and they knew that there must be help, and they had to fight tooth and nail, and they usually died while they were fighting. But because of those people and because of the other amazing people, the scientists and the doctors and the researchers, they started to come up with ways to not cure it, but to give you chances at life. And as time's gone on, they've discovered the art antiretroviral drugs. And that is because of those people. But back then, nobody really knew what it was. No one understood it. A lot of people, 35 million, an enormous amount of people were dying, really terrible deaths. And it was like the Black Plague. Today, people aren't dying of AIDS and so much, but people still die in other countries. And 2 women in New Zealand, 3 people in the last 3 years have died of AIDS, 2 women and 1 man, because it wasn't diagnosed. It was diagnosed too late. So it is still there, but it's the difference. That is the difference. You've got the drugs, so people don't know about it. And then because nobody's thinking about it in New Zealand, at least, or in Australia or in England, when they hear about it, the first thing they do is they think about Philadelphia, the movie, or they think about AIDS. When I told my lady I wanted insurance, I can't get insurance. So I told my lovely lady at the bank that why they wouldn't give me insurance, because she didn't believe me. So I said, well, actually, I have HIV. I don't think your insurance is going to say yes. And so she said, oh, no. So I've known this lady for years, but she saw me down the street maybe 6 months later, and the first thing people do or anywhere, they know you've got HIV, as they look at you and they're like, oh, she looks quite healthy, she looks well. Oh, they're expecting you to look like an AIDS victim, like on death's door. And the fact is that you're not going to look like an AIDS victim today. You're going to look healthy and normal, because you are healthy and normal. You take your drugs, you get a chance to take the drugs. When they give you the drugs, you take the drugs, and your immune system recovers, you're not infectious, and you start to be yourself. And that's the difference. Yeah. We're so lucky. And those people that have had it in the 80s, I think of them as veterans and it was like in the trenches, and it was like a war, and they helped. So yeah. And I read about people when I was in UAE all by myself, all those lonely times, not thinking I was going to die any week. And because that's what I thought too. I thought, oh, I'll probably die next week. I'm going to get a cold and die. And I started reading, spending all my time reading about it, understanding it. And I read about this guy, I think his name's Dab Gardner, and his teddy bears. And because all these people were put in isolation, he's still alive today. And he's got his teddy bear foundation because he was looking after people and he couldn't touch them, but at least he could give them their teddy bear. This is in the USA. But then the hospital rang him and said, we've got a little girl and her mother has died from drugs and she's got AIDS. Can you take care of her? And so him and his partner took care of her until she died. I think she was about 5 or 6. And that's a hero. That's like, people need to know these stories. That's like such a hero, like what he did. So, and he started, I think, a big foundation, and that his daughter, even though she was so little, said, you've got to keep giving people the teddy bears. Yeah. I started my medication in 2012, as soon as I was in New Zealand, I was able to go on it because my CD4 was dropping quite quickly then. That wasn't when there was a threshold? There was, but it hadn't quite gone up to 500 threshold. It was still down at 350, and my CD4 was 460. But I guess because I'm an older lady, my doctor said, we'll just put it down as asymptomatic. And so I was able to go on them immediately. And then when I did that, within 2 weeks, I was undetectable. And then it took me a while to decide that I was truly uninfectious, but deep down I knew I was. And I'm a early childhood teacher. Then I knew that I was safe and that by hook or by crook, nobody was going to get my HIV. So within 2 weeks, I was undetectable, and that was in 2012. And back then, they were doing longitudinal studies, but nobody was going to say to you that means you're uninfectious. Yes, so there was still a big grey area about exactly what does undetectable mean. And I also thought it was a little bit mean for people to say, I'm undetectable, but you're not, you know. So there's this whole wee judgy thing. And I would, you know, I have this, my own self-stigma. I have this HIV, I have this plague, I have this terrible, scary, freakish thing. It just took a while to decide that I was truly uninfectious. When the first longitudinal studies came out saying that there has been no transmission, and when there has been transmission, it's because the partner fessed up and said I wasn't monogamous, so they were the causes, then it was easier to accept. And as time's gone on, I've just become happier in myself and my knowledge, and I've got healthier in my CD4 count. I've always been undetectable, and my CD4 at 460 is now 1250. So as that kept going up, you know, you just get more faith in the drugs and the medication, and I know that I'm okay. So yes.
Great. What does being uninfectious mean?
Uninfectious to me means that I am uninfectious, I am undetectable, I cannot give my HIV to anybody. I cannot give it to young children that I work with at all, anyway. I cannot give it to my partner. I now have a partner, and we live together, and we've bought a house together, and I am U equals U. So U equals U is undetectable equals uninfectious, and that's, so I'm undetectable, I am uninfectious. My partner is U equals U. He is negative, but he is actually U equals U. He came on the Pride March last year because he believes it. He did his research, he read about it, he knows. We cannot, I will not give it to him. I still like him to get tested because there's, you know, I think that you need to be logical and smart. But as far as, yeah, that's what it means.
Yeah.
It means I cannot pass it on.
Yeah.
It means that I am just me. I started my costume making again. I started being more myself again, and I just started trying to be, you know, I just started to heal. It wasn't just the U equals U, it was part of just getting your head around everything, but still, I started to heal, and a big part of that was knowing that I could not give it to anybody, because, you know, that would be awful, wouldn't it? And so, yeah, I've had some awful things with my HIV happen. I would not wish. The worst thing in New Zealand, you need to get tested, everybody who gets sick. In New Zealand, we have, unless you don't know you have it, unless you never get tested, as soon as you're tested in New Zealand, you can go on the drugs, and that's really important to know. So if there's anything, it doesn't matter. Who cares if you wouldn't have any reason to think that you would, how could you get HIV? Just get a test. It's like, just along with liver functions and everything, get an HIV test. If by some weird chance you have HIV, you can then go on treatment. So in New Zealand, people that become positive, that are exposed to HIV, can live very normal lives. To me, the biggest problem of having HIV is the stigma and discrimination. So I had a few early experiences when I first came back to New Zealand, much worse than when I was in UAE, and that was because I was in a mess, and I told some people that I shouldn't have told. I told people when I was drunk, you know, I was just getting my head around it. And so, you know, you just own what you are and who you are and what you did and what you know, and that's how it was. And along the way, I became a positive speaker because people did things like they rung up people and told them, and they warned people about me, and people, I'm an early childhood educator, so my work got phone calls in Invercargill. So, and I had told always told my bosses, but it would take me a while. You don't just tell them on the first day. You don't have to, it's human rights, and it's difficult, why would I? But before I became a positive speaker, I did tell my boss. I think she already knew because she had had phone calls. But we worked through that. She just would say to anybody that was concerned, we follow health and safety regulations, we use gloves, we follow strict hygiene things. It's not for any one thing, it's just health and safety, period. So it was fine, and that's how it was for 5 years, and it was great. Then I moved to the West Coast and I got a new position, and I'm now a positive speaker and have done quite a few speaking things, but mainly for, I've done maybe 2 or 3 things for magazines. Not my own story, but part of a group. So it's always been like in a feature or something. So recently I was rung up by the Dominion Post, and the Dominion Post wanted me to be part of their amazing, fantastic feature for Wellington about HIV, and they went through the whole history. And I guess I was the middle-aged woman people, because statistically in New Zealand, a big group of people, new transmissions, are actually people my age. You know, we get divorced, we start to go out, we start to have sex, we think no, everybody's like us and nobody's going to give it to anybody, nobody's going to get anything, which of course is not true. So, so that being said, they asked me and I said yes. I then said, thought I should, out of courtesy, say to tell my teachers in case anybody read it. So I did that, and then the area manager of that company was informed, and then they decided that they should put a letter out to tell the parents, and they then, when most parents, this was the Friday afternoon and it was going out on the Saturday, so most parents had already, either their child wasn't there that day or they had already picked up their child. So they decided they better go and make sure that everybody got that letter, and they went door to door between 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock, knocking on doors. And to give people an example of what that might feel like, when they let somebody else who's been accused out of jail, that's been imprisoned for sex offending, and people learn of this and they all go around and putting those things in their mailboxes. That's what they did. How could they not think that? It didn't dawn on them that that would be the effect that it would have on the person they did it to. They treated me like a criminal. So, and then they put it on their Story Park page, and I saw that in the morning, on the Saturday morning when I checked. Because my boss was pretty angry and had given me, there were some phone calls that weren't very fun. So then on the Monday, of course, there was a few upset parents because they said, well, you know, you would be too if you got given, your door got knocked on a Friday night with a letter and a child illness policy and another brochure about you equals you. The child illness policy kind of like cemented the whole thing that I'm some health risk. And in the letter, it said quite clearly that they did not have any idea that I had HIV when they employed me. So that it was mortifying, it was devastating, and I've never had any experience like this ever with my HIV. So I did, after a week of not being able to sleep, did write to the Human Rights Commission, and then I rang up New Zealand Employment, and they said you need to tell your company how things are for you and exactly why, because that is good faith. So I did that, and then I was still on trial, the 90-day trial, and then things started to get quite tense, I suppose, and then they said because I had an untenable relationship and brought up these other things that had happened, and I was dismissed on just before my 90 days was finished. So that's what happened, because I still hadn't heard, I hadn't had any help, like they were still working through the whole. It takes 15 working days for the Human Rights Commission to, and they had given me a mediator, but the day I was fired, I still didn't know anything. So the reporter who had taken my picture in Greymouth had stayed in touch with me to see how things were, and wanted to see the letter that they gave to parents. So the day I was fired, I gave her the letter, and simply because in my mind they obviously had no idea. They did write a letter, the COO did write a letter to say, oh, we're very sorry for your anguish and humiliation, however, you gave us no choice because of the timing and things like this. So I just didn't want them to get away scot-free with the whole thing, what they had done to, the week after that was all happened, I had to sit there in the office. I would always say hi to the kids as they're coming in because I was a new manager and I was right by the door. I had to sit there and smile and try to be normal. And the humiliation is something that I cannot describe. I didn't sleep. I still don't sleep properly. Excuse me. I think that this incident that happened was bullying, and it was discrimination at its worst, and it was it showed absolutely no compassion. It was no empathy. It was unnecessary. Their reaction was a complete overreaction. When I talked on the Thursday, the area manager, when she had already, I tried to ring her, but she had already, someone else had rung her. So when she rang me at 11 o'clock, knowing everything, I did say you can ring Positive Women or NZAF. There are people to explain this, and I tried to explain how it was. I tried to explain about undetectable, and honestly, they did not want to know. My manager said, I know about this thing. And she also said on the following Tuesday that I probably would be better off not to come to work with cuts. So just take leave without pay. So that's what happened, and it was horrible. It was awful. I couldn't leave the house. I would only go out with my partner if I had to do shopping and that, and if there was too many people, I'd have to leave. Yeah. We went out to this one place where we'd listen to music on the Sunday, and next thing these families arrived and the little children, and they weren't any of the children from my centre, but some of them I wondered if they would be, and I just had to leave. I couldn't be there. It was just, I love my job. I love being an early childhood teacher. It's probably like my vocation. It took me a lot of years to discover that about myself, but I love it. And now I can't really do it. When I tell people when they want to know, because you read what you read in the media and everything, so when I tell people about everything, like it still has this effect. And I think that speaks for itself, that it was kind of soul-destroying. And when you discriminate against people, which they say they said in the letter, we do not discriminate. But going around door to door, what was that? In what world would that be not, pointing something out and putting a big red flag up? They just had no idea of what they were doing, I guess. But I think it was a violation. That's how it feels. And it was clear breach of privacy. Yeah, it was just wrong, and it was terrible. It was a horrible experience. It is a horrible experience, and now I'm unemployed, and I don't even want to work with children because it doesn't even feel safe now, because it would happen again. So I was really great. I was so lucky. I had 5 years in a really good centre, community-based centre, and now I'm not there. And I think that at 55 I have to retrain. So
Such a loss.
it's a loss because I loved it, and it's a loss for some of the children because I think I was good at it. Sharing my story of my experience for having HIV, living with HIV, for me, somebody said, so I spoke to the media, and there were a lot of comments, and one of the comments was, you know, well, this lady is a self-professed activist. And this, I didn't reply, but for this comment I did. I said, well, actually I'm not really. I have only spoke a few times to some people when they've asked, but not particularly am I an activist. I just want to get on with my life. But I am an educator, and that is what I am. And my profession is an early childhood educator, but in fact, I have a degree in education. I'm an educator. People that are educators, they want to educate. I have a disease that is completely misunderstood. I have a virus that people want to just immediately think of Philadelphia. They immediately think of horror stories and Freddie Mercury and people dying, really bad deaths. And so people need to be educated. And in New Zealand, we have a low prevalence of HIV, so people don't know about it. And that is why we have, the stigma is worse in New Zealand. In Africa and other countries, China probably, lots of Asian countries, the disease is worse because, you know, you're struggling to get the drugs. But here we are so blessed and so lucky, and it's great. But because of that, there's a lot of misinformation around this disease. And in my book, there's a lot of worse things today. And I have friends that have had cancer, and my mother died of cancer. There are so many worse things. And why would you judge one thing? You know, there's a lot of reasons it needs to be talked about. It is not a criminal offence to have HIV. It is not, you should not be treated differently because you have HIV. And you should not have to declare it. You should not be on some register. If you want to talk about it, that's your privilege, but you do not need to because it is treatable. You do not have, if you there's this whole question mark, and it's a criminal offence if you don't tell somebody when you have sex and you don't use a condom. And even if you do use a condom, I think they can still, there's a grey area. But what if you have herpes or, there's so many things. What about people that have the HPV virus and then somebody gets cervix or throat cancer because they didn't know? So where do you draw the line? So it's time that HIV was decriminalised, and there's only one way we're going to do that, and that's talk about it, and that's to make people aware. And today we have the drugs. There is no need for any sort of discrimination, and you shouldn't judge a person because anybody who is, so many people have sex, don't they? I mean, it's biological, come on. We all have sex, unless we're like really celibate. Most of the population, once they get to a certain age, will have sex. Most of those people will have at least one incidence of unprotected sex. So, and you might not get it through sex, you might have been born with it. I've met people that are born with it, I've met people that come from different countries. People get it through medical mishaps, or they get it through drugs. It is, that's why I need to talk and educate. When I need to be in a care home and my children don't want to look after me, I think that they just need to know that, I take my drugs. So I've been so lucky, I take my drugs every single night, and I've only changed them once because the first lot made me quite evil, really, I think, depressed, something weird, having weird dreams. So I changed them. I've never changed my drugs since these drugs. The caregiver needs to know that you have this condition, that you're not infectious, that you're a normal person, that you do not need to be put in quarantine or double rubber gloved or whatever they call it. All of these things, they need to know this, that it is not in my blood, but I must take my pills every night. The same as if I have a heart condition, the same as if I have diabetes. It's just medical procedure. And that's what the caregiver needs to know. If because of the HIV and other health-related conditions that comes with ageing occur, then they need to be dealt with. The most important thing that caregivers need to know is how to treat that thing, and they need to be logical and informed and objective. And after that, your caregiver needs to be caring, and you want that caregiver. But always when dealing with medical issues, you need to be logical and objective. And I think that's the big issue around, you know, how we treat people with infectious disease, is we become illogical. But there's no need for that. Like I keep saying, it's 2018. Let's get with the program, you know. I haven't so much heard of stories with older people in care, but I have heard of a lot of older people quite concerned and lobbying as we speak for those sorts of issues, and worried about what will happen to them. I think places like America, that there have been lots of issues, but I don't know of any personally in New Zealand, because those of us who are older with HIV are just amazing and healthy, and we don't need to go into homes. Okay. We're just fantastic. And what makes me happy? Being myself, just living a normal life, doing exercise, listening to music, and going on pride parades. I was going in the centre parade. I love parades. So it's colourful things. The whole world needs more colour. Seeing nature, that's what makes me happy. And being myself, and you know, embracing life. And I think that you need to do that. Life is short. Who knows? So to reduce stigma, we need to normalise HIV by just talking about it, by educating about it, by making it, you know, just putting it in places. Like on Emmerdale, they gave What's Her Handle HIV, and that was pretty cool. And that would be the other thing, Shortland Street, is don't have a gay man with HIV, have a woman, because this is where people are like, really? You know, so there's that whole stigma as well. And globally, it's 50-50. So we need, you know, it's those sorts of things of information will reduce stigma. And I think in South Africa, where such as 25% of the population or more has HIV, there is lots of areas where there is no stigma. People just accept you, they love you, they're wonderful, because it's part of their whole growing up experience. They just know about it. So clearly that's the secret, isn't it? Education. So that's what I think will reduce stigma.